On this episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored, we're going to be joined by none other than my sister. My sister, Terry, is going to be joining us, and she is a cancer survivor. And we're going to be talking about breast cancer survival, reconstruction, and everything there is to know about breast cancer. So you definitely want to join in. It's going to be a very, very informative episode. Welcome to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I'm your host, Dr. Roddy Raban, and today we're going to have a very special episode because not only are we joined by someone who is going to give us a lot of insight and information, but this happens to be my sister. So my sister Terry is going to be joining us as she is now Terry, how many years are you cancer-free?
10.
She's a 10-year double mastectomy breast cancer survivor, and I really wanted to have her on the show so that we can talk about breast cancer reconstruction, the interpersonal relationships, how it impacted her life, how it impacted her relationship, etc. Because as we all know, they say 1 in 8, 1 in 9, 1 in 7 women are going to be affected by breast cancer. Ironically, I had a conversation this morning with a dear friend of mine who's only 37, who's considering a double mastectomy. So it impacts everybody, and I think that there's no shortage of having good conversations. So welcome, Terry. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Awesome.
Okay, so why don't we talk about breast cancer in general? So one of the things that I think your situation with breast cancer is unusual in that it highlights some very important factors. Number one, there's a misunderstanding or a misbelief that people who get breast cancer necessarily have a very strong family history of it. We have absolutely no family history of breast cancer. Do you know of anyone in our family who's had breast cancer in the immediate family?
I do not.
No. So here, this idea that, if my mother or my grandmother or my aunt or my sister has it, then that's the only way. No, she has no history of breast cancer in our family. Second thing, there's this notion that, I don't smoke, I don't drink, so it's unlikely to happen. Terry, do you smoke?
I do not.
Do you drink any alcohol?
None at all.
How's my sister, for all intents and purposes, is almost a vegetarian, meaning lifestyle, holistic wise, very, very sort of clean in that regard. So that's another misbelief, that if I lead a holistic, high quality life, then I'm not going to get cancer. Another misrepresentation is that, if I've had children if I had children and I had children early, that reduces my risk, which indeed it may by statistics. But Terry, when did you have your first child?
I was 30.
30, which is considered relatively young. And how many children did you have?
3.
3. And you had all your children by the time you were like 36?
37, yeah.
Yeah, 36. So that's another thing that people say that, if I have, if I have my kids early and I have many, that I'm going to be at lower risk. So in many regards, she is a sort of, we all scratched our head when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, because we said, why her? I don't even understand. She's the last person on earth should be getting it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got diagnosed? Because, so what we're trying to do here is just bring awareness in preparation, in journey, once you get it, what you need to do, etc. So first thing you need to know is anyone is susceptible. And nowadays, how old were you when you got diagnosed, Terry?
42.
42. So that's, in my opinion, incredibly young. Although now we're getting patients at the age of 35, even 32, etc. So tell me, what is it? How did you get diagnosed? How did you figure it out?
So I had done a mammogram to just for a checkup, and I had done the mammogram actually in the August before I got diagnosed, and then I got diagnosed actually the following March. And so the way I got diagnosed was actually I found a lump myself, because I did the self breast exam every month, which I highly, highly recommend, because that's how actually I think I saved my own life, because nothing showed up on the mammogram back in August. And so I ended up, having that, I had a lump, which I spoke to my doctor about, and she was, let's kind of take a look at, weight a week or so, just to see, maybe it could be hormonal, it could probably, it could go away by itself. So let's just keep an eye on it. And of course it didn't go away. And I was actually preparing for my daughter's bat mitzvah, and so I had to for my doctor, who's a very close friend of mine, actually was, you know what, let's just take a look, make sure, because I don't want you to have to worry about it while you're preparing for your event. So I ended up going in. She checked. She goes, well, I see something, but I'm 100% sure it's nothing, knowing your history. And so she says, you know what, but just to make sure, let's do another ultrasound and mammogram. And then of course they saw some calcification. And so I had to end up going, to just follow up on that and having not to worry about it. I ended up doing a needle biopsy. And of course,
and of course that came back as positive. So this is so crucial for anyone who's listening to pay attention to. The reason you need to pay attention is I can't tell you how many times a month I am having conversations with young patients who are 30, 41, 42, 43. And I say, okay, when was your last mammogram? They're like, haven't had one, or it's been many years. So there are very few cancers today that you can get that we can screen and we can somewhat prevent or predict and do screening for. Stomach cancer, very hard, even though you do an endoscopy, pancreatic cancer, bone cancer, etc. But pap smears help with cervical cancer, and colonoscopies help with colon cancer, and breast exams and breast studies like mammography definitely help. So number one is that you got to get your mammography. There's no reason for you not to get it. But what this underscores is, even if you get a mammogram, there's absolutely no excuse not to get it, that it's not bulletproof. And what it gets down to is Terry, I mean, obviously I have the luxury of knowing she's a very OCD person. She prides herself on being very sort of regimented. And when she learned early on, you need to do self-breast exam, which every woman should be doing, 90% plus women don't do self-exam, meaning they don't, on a routine basis at the same time every month, do a very thorough exam of their breast and gland. And so what ultimately happened is she got a mammogram, as she was supposed to. The mammogram did not catch it. And on her own cursory exam that she did every month at the same time. Why is the same time important? Because if you do it at different times of the month, your breasts behave differently. I'm not sure exactly, Terry, is it supposed to be 1 week before, after your period, or one?
Correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you want to do it at the same time every month, a week after your period, because obviously as you're getting ready for your period, premenstrual, it tends to get swollen and cystic and lumpy and painful. And then you do that, and then who knows better than you your own breast tissue? Not your husband, not your boyfriend. No one knows your breast tissue better than you, assuming that you've been doing this every single month for the last number of years. And sure enough, she came across something that nobody, not even her OB who loves her and knows her, found. So at the end of the day, no one is going to take credit for this other than herself. And then, of course, you do what everybody else does at that point. You do a workup. You do the ultrasound, you do the mammogram. If you need a biopsy, you do the biopsy. So Terry, we go back. You did your biopsy, and the biopsy came back and showed what?
That I was, there's 3 different markers that they look at. I was, I don't remember the terminology of it, but I was estrogen positive, some other hormone positive, and HER negative, which are the 3 markers that they look at. And of all the different types to have, I have the best one that would respond best to chemotherapy.
Okay. So they did. And then what kind of breast cancer was it? Because there is ductal and there's lobular. There's
ductal. Mine was ductal.
And there's DCIS, which is considered precancerous. And then there's ductal invasive. So there's invasive and precancerous. So yours was ductal and DCIS, or was it invasive?
Invasive. It had already gone into my ducts. Mm-hmm.
Right. So you had invasive. So just listen, this is not going to be a lecture on breast cancer because that's not my area of expertise, but you need to know is that breast cancers come in different cellular types. And then, of course, if you catch it early on, it's precancerous. And then if you catch it after it's already become cancer, it's called invasive. And then within that, there are different markers. And as we advance in the biology of breast cancer, we come to realize that some markers are more prognostic to do better and others. And thank God yours was pro. So, okay, you got the diagnosis. Obviously, the whole family was in freak out mode. And then, so what did you do? Did you run and stick your head in the sand? Did you just disappear? We know family members and friends of ours that were diagnosed with breast cancer who have sadly passed and died because once they were diagnosed, at that point, they did not respond to doing what needs to be done at the next phase. So what happened? What happened to you?
Well, so I definitely needed a few days to digest. So that, and for me, that was, interesting time because I'm always on the run and doing things. So that those 2-3 days where I always say I was paralyzed from the diagnosis. But once I was able to get back up, I ended up, putting a plan in place as to what it is that I needed to do because I had 3 young children. My oldest was 13 and then a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. So my maternal instincts kicked in overdrive. And I always, I was thinking, what do I need to do in order to survive? So of course, after that, we went to many, many, many doctors to understand what it is that I needed to do. I was given different plans, and ultimately it was my decision. I ended up doing a lumpectomy, and then ended up, the margins were not clear. So I ended up thinking, you know what, I'm just going to do a mastectomy. And then it was my choice to have a double mastectomy because there was a chance that I would be getting it in my other breast. And I was young enough where I did not want to have to worry about that. So I ended up doing that. And then the option of chemotherapy was also, I ended up, once I was in, doing my lumpectomy.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Yes. So we can take this as piece by piece. So the first point is you get this horrific diagnosis, and this diagnosis literally rocks your world. No matter who you are, what kind of background you have, what kind of surroundings you have, what kind of support you have, a diagnosis of this caliber is nothing more than just paralyzing. And then the question then becomes is how do you respond? Do you get back on the horse and figure out a plan of action, or do you let the fear and let the sadness and paralyze you into not doing what you need to do? And so whether that is that you harness the energy of your motherhood, whether it is because you have the will to survive, whether it is because you are a persevering person, the bottom line is that you did what you do when you were faced with problems. And that is you created a collective plan. You surround yourself with people that love you. You have family members and husbands and kids. And then you started this journey. And so we know people who, once they got the diagnosis, they went down some really bizarre paths. And everyone knows I'm all about all kinds of approaches, but I don't think treating breast cancer through holistic, homeopathic approaches is the right answer. And I think there is no question that in certain areas, I don't know, blood pressure, maybe a little bit of thyroid issues, it can help, but I wouldn't treat cancer with it. At any rate, we made a plan. So that's that. Once we made the plan, the next thing is you need to seek advice. And so we just did an episode with Dr. Tofi where we were talking about people who go and get one advice, like go to the first guy or first gal and they, you know what, you need a double mastectomy. Okay. No, not okay. No. You need to have several pieces of information. So what creates the team for a breast cancer patient? There are 3 members. There is your medical oncologist, there is your surgical oncologist, and there's your reconstructive surgeon. Each person is independent and cannot be deleted or non-existent. Your medical oncologist is the person, and your medical oncologist was incredible, was Dr. McAndrews.
Correct.
Your medical oncologist gives you statistics, tells you about chemo, potential radiation, and they really are your quarterback. Your surgical oncologist is the individual that removes the breast cancer. whether that's a lumpectomy, a mastectomy, a skin-sparing mastectomy, and all those options. And your plastic surgeon is the individual that you would come in and do any reconstruction if it's necessary. And in your instance, the first thing you did was, hey, this appears like this cancer is small, and it appears that it's in a favorable location. So I'm going to do a lumpectomy. I'm going to remove just the cancer and some healthy cells around it, and get some radiation and call it a day. And when the pathology came back, it turned out that the margins were not positive, were not cleared. Correct, Tara?
Correct. The lumpectomy still, because you need to have a certain amount of a clear margin in order to be, for the surgeon to be happy with the results. And I did not have a big enough clear margin. So I had to either go back into having another lumpectomy or cleaning the margins, or having the mastectomy. And
you also had a sentinel lymph node.
Correct.
You also had your lymph nodes checked, and instead of them being negative, the first node was positive.
Correct.
Means that the cancer was very aggressive, albeit small, and that while we did not know the extent of how far it had spread. And if you do a lymph nodes and it's not present in the lymph nodes, we say the horse has not left the barn. But in your instance, the horse had already left the barn and it had entered into a lymph node, which changes the risk stratification. So after speaking to many, many doctors and whatnot, you decided the second time, rather than going and doing another lumpectomy, screw it, I'm going to do a mastectomy, which I do believe at the time was the right decision to do. So at that moment, didn't you have another, when they did you did your prophylactic, this other side at a later time, right, Terry?
Correct, because the doctor wanted me to just kind of concentrate on the breast that had the cancer.
Right. So we did the cancer surgery and they did the mastectomy, and they found inside that breast, there was another location where there was another cancer, correct?
Correct. There was other areas, I think 1 or 2 areas that were suspect, meaning that they were cancerous.
Right. So then that gives you a great deal of hope that the decision to do a mastectomy was the right thing, because the reality is the other areas would have come probably to the surface. And at that point, given the circumstances, it only made sense for you to do a double mastectomy, meaning do the other side and then, A, not have to worry about it. And B, it actually creates better cosmetics because you have one breast that was an implant reconstruction. We're going to get to that in the second half of this episode. And the other side was like a natural breast. So you had a normal breast on one side and an implant breast on the other. And so that never ends up looking correct, no matter how hard you try. So what we'll do is we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back. We're going to talk about, the aftermath. How did this impact your relationship with your family, your impact with your husband? Because there's a lot of ramifications that go beyond just the body and the breast. And how did you manage and cope, and how are you doing today? So you definitely want to tune into the second half of our episode as we're going to get into some of the emotional and psychological aspects of breast cancer. All right, welcome back to the second half of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I am so lucky that my sister, Terry, has joined us. She is a 10-year survivor of breast cancer, and what a fine example of resilience and perseverance. And you know what? OCD does pay off, and the OCD is, and we always laugh about it in our family because we all have some genetic predisposition to being compulsive. And in this instance, we can certainly say that it saved your life. So you ended up having a double mastectomy. Let's fast forward. You did an implant reconstruction. We had 2 guests here, 2 of my friends and colleagues, that we had a whole episode on breast cancer reconstruction. So we won't get into the details of why you chose that, but you did. So let's spend the second half talking about the emotional aspect. So let's just start out with you as an individual. You got the diagnosis, you were 42, you were married, you had 3 kids. How did the process go from beginning to end, and how did you, and tell me about your emotional journey as a person to where you are now? So it definitely, again, was, it hit me like a ton of bricks, as they say. But the first few days was just kind of devastating. I was trying to digest. And of course, my husband as well was, having a hard time, because he honestly thought when we went for the needle biopsy that
of course, it's nothing. I mean, why would it be anything? I mean, the history is not there. But when we did get the diagnosis, I think he was more paralyzed than I was. But we kind of digested it and then made the plan, and then went to many doctors, many scans, and we did a lot of those. And of course, it was very draining, but I had this drive where I just needed to do what it took to survive, to be there for my kids. And so I think the fact that I had kids in some ways helped me move forward and do the things I needed to do. Whereas if I didn't have kids, I would probably be more depressed and just not wanting to, I would probably be set back quite a bit from time to time. But my kids just made me want to get better, do what it takes, kind of, get back on the horse, as they say. And the biggest thing for me was, again, the fact that I had kids helped. Was I tried really hard for them not to see me sick, because they were little, and I didn't want them to ever think that they're going to ever lose their mom, or, what is wrong with mom. And so we came up with a plan with my husband where I would do my chemo during the week, so that by the end of the weekend where it hits, I would have my husband take care of the kids, so they won't see me not feeling well. And then, of course, again, they would go back to school during the, starting on Monday. So yes, that part of it was very emotional and very hard. And at times, I thought I kept it all together very well, but there were times where I just would, break down and not, and had to let it go and just not be so strong, and try and just have some release. And of course, I think there was an episode where I think I don't know if Roddy remembers, but he came when I was thinking of the reconstructive portion of it. I was I never forget. I think Kevin, my husband, called Roddy and said, "Please come, because Terry's not doing well, and she needs your help, because she's thinking about the reconstructive portion of the journey, and she needs she's just having a hard time with it." And so Roddy came and we talked, and he made me feel so much better. And then of course I decided from there to do implants, because another option was to do flap. I'm not sure if you had mentioned that, Roddy, or not, but flap was to reconstruct based on your own tissues from your stomach or your back. But I decided against that. Roddy we talked, I spoke to Roddy about that, and I decided to go with the implants versus the flap. So
yeah, and I think and you highlight so many issues, which is it's natural, and many patients who undergo this diagnosis have to recognize that it's going to be a journey. It's going to start out with denial, then it's going to get fear, then it's going to get anger, then it's going to, the same journey you go through. They call it the grievance, stages of grievance. And so you do the same thing when, God forbid, you lose a family member or whatnot. And it's the natural progression of coming to grips with such a difficult diagnosis. But the key to that is that you constantly give yourself the freedom to be in that stage. Like, you recognize, like, oh, wow, I'm really scared. Oh, wow, I'm really angry. Oh, wow, I'm really sad. And the thing I think that's crucial is to surround yourself with people that you love. So in your instance, you had a great husband, you had great family members, you have a great friends, you have great community. So that worked. But a lot of people are lonely, and they don't have that much resource. And so it's really important to find key components, key people to help you through the journey. So if it's your best friend, if it's a coworker or whatever, then, tell me about your relationship with your husband, because that's really a big deal, right? Because it's the A, I'm getting cancer. It's the B, that I'm a mom, but it's the C, that you were only 42. It's still a crucial part of your life. At the end of the day, breasts are part of your sense of self and beauty and attraction and whatnot. And how did your interaction with your husband go, and what kind of advice do you have to people who are in that place?
Well, I must say, Kevin was amazingly supportive. If anything, if I was hard on myself, he was the one who would just say, you know what, you should just, not worry about that. Of course, like you said, the the look, of course, is as much as you don't want to sound shallow, it is a part of your body, the image that you of course fear that it's not going to be the same. I did have some radiation as well, so that changed the skin tone, and as to how the implants really look in my breast. So there's a lot of different beauty changes, to my breasts. And of course, myself, of course, was, I was very, it made me really think about that. And then, of course, but Kevin was very, very much supportive, and he kept pushing me forward and saying, you know what, you look amazing, you're fine, just hang in there. This is a journey, you'll be fine at the end, and you look fine, you look amazing. Of course, it was a lot more my own issue.
Yeah, of course.
Him not liking what he saw.
Do you find that you're in a place now where you're not as self-conscious, or not self-conscious at all anymore? Or do you think that that's always something that will be present?
No, it would always be present, because of course, with my kids and my husband, not at all. This is all on me. It's just my own way, my own thinking. There's many times that I avoid looking at myself in the mirror, just to not have to look at that. Although, I've come to terms with it 100%. I'm just, happy to be alive, of course. But there's many times that, that I don't look at myself, because I feel like what I see reminds me of my journey again, and how it's not ideal. The look is not ideal, of course, because of the, the reconstruction and the radiation.
So what that underscores is, it doesn't mean that if you are, you have to be one or the other, all or none. Human beings are compartmentalized. You are grateful. You are beyond blessed that you have survived, and you're not only survive, but thrive, as they say. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're just going to overlook the fact that a part of you isn't in congruency with the way you feel. That's the way people feel with trauma, and the way they feel about other things or congenital issues. You just never really just overlook these things. So they're always a part of you. There'll always be a journey with you. And as you said, you learn to cope with it, and you learn to manage it, and you don't push it aside and ignore it, but you just recognize, okay, well, this is a part of my body, for example, that I'm not crazy about. It doesn't mean that you grow into a ball and become depressed, but you also don't lie about it and act like it is. And you're lucky. You have a great husband, and he's a huge component of this, because some people, unfortunately, their life partners are not so understanding. The last part about, I want to talk about is just your interaction with, how you have come full circle, and where you think, have you think that this breast cancer has hindered you and kept you back, and you wish, or in what ways you think it may have changed you for the better? I mean, nobody wishes breast cancer onto themselves, but at the end of the day, you cannot deny that you're not the same person. The trajectory of your life at 42 would not have been where you are now in your 50s, in that you're just a different person. So in what ways did the breast cancer cause you maybe grief, or in what ways were you now perhaps stronger, better, whatever it is?
Well, of course, when something like this happens to you, it throws you for a loop, no doubt about that. But I feel like I've come out of it a better person, because the biggest thing for me was I was very much, I sweated, like they say, sweated the small stuff. And because I think it has a lot to do with my OCD and my being a perfectionist. But I'm thinking, I feel like my perspective has changed, and I'm trying very hard not to let the little things bother me as much. Of course, life throws you stuff every day, but I'm trying to not let it get to me as much as it used to in the past. So definitely my perspective has changed. And again, the gratitude is definitely, I just feel very lucky to be here. And I feel I had to go through this journey somehow, because I feel like I've helped ever since I've been diagnosed. I've been, very vocal, and I've talked to many people and helped them through their journey, because I have no problem talking about it. Because some people are like, you know what, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm done. I don't want to have to revisit. But for me, I think it's a way for me to be able to help someone else go through their journey. So I think it definitely has changed me for the better in that sense.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful statement. I mean, we talk about paying it forward, and it's a completion to a journey, right? You can bury your head in the sand, or you can move forward and recognize it is a part of your life. And many things you'll never understand. In your instance, as we said in the family, we never understood why you got it, right? You never smoked, you never drank, you only had, one life partner, you had children early, we have no family history. I mean, by all intents and purposes, statistically, you're very, very, very unlikely to get it, but you did. And so the question is, what the hell do you do with the lemons, right? And I think that you've done an incredible job of making lemonade. And so as your younger brother, I am proud of you, and I'm grateful that you came on to the show. And your story is one of millions, and all it does is exemplifies a journey, not the journey, but a journey, and from which people can mirror and parallel their own lives. I think you've had an incredibly successful journey with breast cancer, as successful as one can be, in that you fought it and you've risen above it. And that's all you can do, right? You can fight something and rise above it and keep moving. And of course, I'm grateful that you did. And we're happy to have you. And we'll have more conversations. The story never ends. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. Make sure to join us next week, because as always, whatever topic we'll be talking about, I'm sure is going to be interesting.